What happens when two of Hollywood's most legendary actors find themselves on opposite sides of a conversation that spirals completely out of control? When Jack Nicholson agreed to sit down for what was supposed to be a simple interview, no one expected Denzel Washington to walk into the room. And what followed was one of the most uncomfortable, tension-filled exchanges ever caught on camera. Before we dive into this jaw-dropping story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us which actor you think handled this better. Now, let's get into what really happened. The studio was buzzing with the usual pre-interview energy. Cameras were being positioned, lighting adjusted, and the production crew moved with practiced efficiency. Jack Nicholson sat in his chair, relaxed as always, wearing his signature sunglasses even though they were indoors. He had that trademark smirk on his face, the one that had defined so many of his iconic roles. At 76 years old, Jack still carried himself with the confidence of someone who had conquered Hollywood decades ago and never looked back. The interview was supposed to be straightforward. A respected film journalist had arranged to sit down with Jack to discuss his career, his approach to acting, and some of his most memorable performances. It was the kind of conversation Jack had done 100 times before. Easy, comfortable, predictable. But then the door opened, and Denzel Washington walked in. The energy in the room shifted immediately. Denzel wasn't scheduled to be there. This wasn't a joint interview. The journalist looked confused, glancing between his notes and the unexpected arrival. Denzel, dressed impeccably in a dark suit, moved with purpose. His expression was serious, almost stern. This wasn't a casual drop by Dot, Jack noticed immediately. He tilted his head slightly, adjusting his sunglasses as he watched Denzel approach. Well, Jack said, that famous grin spreading across his face. Denzel Washington. Didn't know we were having company. Denzel didn't return the smile. He pulled up a chair without asking and sat down directly across from Jack. Close enough that the cameras would capture both of them in frame. "We need to talk, Jack," Denzel said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable weight. The journalist attempted to interject. "I'm not sure we discussed this. We have a scheduled interview with Mr. Nicholson, and I don't think we can just change the format without—" "It's fine," Jack interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. He was still smiling, but there was a flicker of something else in his expression now. Curiosity, maybe, or caution. "Let the man speak. I'm interested to hear what's on his mind." Denzel leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped together. "I've been hearing things, Jack, things you've been saying about younger actors, about how the craft has changed, about how people in this business don't have what it takes anymore." Jack's smile widened. "Did I say that?" "It sounds like something I might say. I believe in calling it like I see it, Denzel. You know that?" "I do know that," Denzel replied, his tone even. "And I also know that words have weight, especially when they come from someone like you, someone who's been in this business as long as you have, someone who people listen to." Jack leaned back in his chair, spreading his arms wide in a gesture that seemed to say he had nothing to hide. "So what's the problem? Are you telling me I should watch what I say? That I need to be more careful? Since when did you become the speech police, Denzel?" "I'm not policing anything," Denzel said, his voice remaining steady. "But when you go on record saying that the current generation of actors doesn't understand real acting, that they're too focused on being celebrities instead of craftsmen, that they lack the dedication and the rawness that our generation had, you're making a statement, and that statement has consequences." The room had gone completely silent. The production crew had stopped what they were doing. Everyone was watching now. This wasn't part of the script. This was real. Jack removed his sunglasses slowly, folding them and setting them on the armrest of his chair. His eyes, now visible, had lost some of their playful glint. "You think I'm wrong?" "I think you're being dismissive," Denzel responded. "I think you're painting with too broad a brush. There are incredible actors working today, young actors who are doing remarkable work, who are dedicated to the craft, who study and train and push themselves. Just because they do it differently than we did doesn't mean they're doing it wrong." Jack shook his head, a small laugh escaping his lips. "Differently? Denzel, come on. You've been around long enough to see it. The way things have changed. Everything is about image now. About social media and brand deals and how many followers you have. Acting has become secondary. It's not about the work anymore. It's about the package. And whose fault is that?" Denzel shot back, his voice rising slightly for the first time. "We're the ones who built this industry into what it is. We're the ones who accepted the paychecks. You can't blame the next generation for inheriting the system we created and thrived in." Jack's jaw tightened. "I didn't create this mess. I showed up, I did my work, and I did it better than almost anyone. That's all I've ever cared about. The work, not the circus around it." "Really?" Denzel challenged, leaning in closer. "Because from where I'm sitting, you've enjoyed plenty of that circus. The reputation, the mystique, the bad boy image. You've played into it your whole career. So don't sit here and act like you're above it all." The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jack's face had hardened, the playful facade completely gone now. "You got something you want to say to me, Denzel? Because it sounds like you came here with an agenda." "I came here because I'm tired of hearing veterans tear down the people coming up behind us," Denzel said firmly. "I'm tired of the gatekeeping. I'm tired of this idea that we did it better, that we were more authentic, that we had some kind of purity that doesn't exist anymore. It's not true, and you know it." "What I know," Jack said, his voice dropping lower, more dangerous, "is that I've earned the right to have an opinion. I've put in the work. I've given performances that people will remember long after I'm gone. Can you say the same about half the people working today? Can you honestly tell me that the standard hasn't dropped?" Denzel didn't blink. "I can tell you that talent exists in every generation. I can tell you that dismissing people because they don't fit your definition of what an actor should be is closed-minded. And I can tell you that coming from someone like you, someone who's supposed to be a legend, it's disappointing." Jack stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. The sudden movement startled the crew. For a moment, it looked like he might walk out, but he didn't. Instead, he turned to face Denzel directly, looking down at him, disappointing. Jack repeated, his voice dripping with disbelief. "You're going to sit here, in front of all these people, and tell me I'm disappointing? After everything I've done? After the career I've had?" Denzel stood as well, meeting Jack's gaze without flinching. "Your career speaks for itself, Jack. No one's questioning that. But your attitude, the way you talk about other actors, that's what's disappointing. You're better than this." The journalist finally found his voice again. "Gentlemen, maybe we should take a moment. Maybe we can... "No," Jack interrupted sharply. "We're not taking a moment. We're finishing this conversation." Jack took a step closer to Denzel, the space between them shrinking. "You want to lecture me about attitude? About how I talk about other actors? Let me tell you something, Denzel. I've forgotten more about acting than most of these kids will ever learn. And if that sounds arrogant to you, I don't care. It's the truth." Denzel crossed his arms, his posture firm and unyielding. "The truth is subjective, Jack. What you call truth, I call opinion. And your opinion isn't gospel just because you've been doing this longer." "My opinion is informed by decades of experience," Jack countered. "By working with the best directors in the world, by creating characters that are still studied in acting classes. You think I should just sit back and watch the art form get watered down and not say anything about it?" "I think you should recognize that the art form is evolving, not dying," Denzel replied. "Things change. Methods change. The industry changes. That doesn't mean it's worse. It means it's different. And maybe, just maybe, there are things happening now that you don't fully understand because you're too busy looking backward." Jack's face flushed red. "Looking backward. I'm looking at reality. I'm looking at actors who can't disappear into a role because they're too busy being themselves. I'm looking at performances that feel manufactured, calculated. There's no danger anymore. No unpredictability. Everything is safe." Denzel's voice took on an edge now. "You want to talk about safe? Let's talk about actors who play the same character in every movie. Let's talk about falling back on mannerisms and quirks instead of actually transforming. Let's talk about actors who got comfortable decades ago and stopped challenging themselves." The implication hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. The crew members exchanged nervous glances. The journalist had given up trying to moderate and was simply watching. His mouth slightly open, Jack's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Are you suggesting that I've gotten comfortable? That I've stopped challenging myself?" "I'm suggesting that criticizing others is easier than examining yourself," Denzel said, not backing down an inch. "I'm suggesting that maybe before you pass judgment on an entire generation of actors, you should ask yourself if you're still pushing your own boundaries. When was the last time you took a role that truly scared you, that made you question whether you could pull it off? I don't take roles that scare me because I know what I'm capable of, Jack shot back. That's called confidence. That's called being a professional. I don't need to prove myself anymore. And that right there is the problem, Denzel said, pointing at Jack. The moment you think you don't need to prove yourself anymore is the moment you stop growing. That's not confidence. That's complacency. Jack laughed, but there was no humor in it. Complacency. From the man who's built a career playing variations of the same righteous, principled character over and over again. That's rich, Denzel. That's really rich. The words struck hard. Denzel's expression tightened, his jaw clenching. At least I bring integrity to those roles. At least I'm trying to say something meaningful with my work. What are you saying, Jack? What are you contributing besides nostalgia for a time that you've mythologized in your own mind? I'm contributing honesty, Jack snapped. I'm contributing performances that are raw and real and unfiltered. I don't sugarcoat things. I don't play it safe. And I sure as hell don't need validation from you or anyone else about my contributions to this business. No one's asking you to play it safe, Denzel replied, his voice rising again. But tearing others down doesn't make you look stronger. It makes you look threatened. It makes you look like someone who's afraid that the next generation might be just as good as you were, or maybe even better. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Jack's face contorted with anger. Threatened. You think I'm threatened by kids who learned their craft from YouTube? Tutorials and acting coaches who never worked a day on a real set? You've lost your mind. I think you're threatened by irrelevance, Denzel said, his words deliberate and cutting. I think you're scared that the world is moving on without you. That your way of doing things isn't the only way anymore. That your legacy might not matter as much as you think it does. My legacy is secure, Jack said through gritted teeth. My body of work speaks for itself. What I've accomplished can't be diminished by anything you say or by whatever flavor of the month actor is being hyped up by studios desperate to make money. Your body of work is incredible, Denzel acknowledged, surprising everyone in the room with the sudden shift. No one disputes that. But your body of work doesn't give you the right to be cruel. It doesn't give you the right to dismiss people who are working just as hard as you ever did, just in different circumstances. Jack opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. For the first time since the confrontation began, he seemed momentarily at a loss for words, but the silence didn't last long. Cruel? Jack finally said, his voice quieter but no less intense. You think I'm being cruel? I'm being honest. If people can't handle honesty, if they need constant praise and validation, then maybe they're in the wrong business. This industry eats people alive, Denzel. You know that. If they can't take criticism from someone like me, how are they going to survive? There's a difference between constructive criticism and contempt, Denzel replied. What you've been doing isn't helping anyone. It's just making you look bitter. Bitter. Jack's voice shot up again. I'm not bitter. I'm protective of something I care about. I'm protective of the craft. You should understand that. Or have you gotten so caught up in being Hollywood's moral compass that you've forgotten what it's like to actually care about the purity of the work? Denzel took a deep breath, visibly trying to maintain his composure. I care about the work more than you know, but I also care about the people doing the work. I care about creating an environment where talent can flourish, where people feel supported and encouraged. That's not being soft. That's being a leader. Jack scoffed. A leader tells people the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. A leader sets standards and holds people accountable. You want everyone to feel good about themselves. Fine, but don't confuse that with actually making them better. And you think humiliating them makes them better? Denzel challenged. You think crushing their confidence and making them feel small is going to bring out their best work? That's not leadership, Jack. That's ego. The word hung between them like an accusation neither could ignore. Jack's hands had balled into fists at his sides. His breathing was heavier now, his face still flushed with anger. My ego has earned its place, Jack said quietly, dangerously. Every ounce of it. Can you say the same? My ego doesn't require me to put others down to feel validated, Denzel responded. That's the difference between us. Jack pointed a finger at Denzel, his hand shaking slightly with the intensity of his emotion. You came here to make yourself look good, to position yourself as the noble one, the defender of the young and vulnerable. But what you're really doing is grandstanding. You're using me to elevate yourself. I came here because someone needed to say something, Denzel said firmly. Because your words have impact, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. And because I respect you too much to let you continue down this path without at least trying to make you see what you're doing. What I'm doing is refusing to lie, Jack said, his voice breaking slightly with emotion now. I'm refusing to pretend that everything is fine when it's not. I'm refusing to lower my standards just to make people feel better. And if that makes me the villain in your story, then so be it. The journalist, sensing that things might escalate further, finally spoke up with more authority. Gentlemen, I think we need to stop here. This has gone far beyond what anyone anticipated, and I don't think continuing is productive. But neither Jack nor Denzel acknowledged him. They were locked in their standoff, two titans of their craft refusing to yield. You're not a villain, Jack, Denzel said, his tone softening just slightly. But you're wrong. And being wrong doesn't diminish what you've accomplished. It just means you're human, like the rest of us. Jack's expression shifted, something flickering across his face that might have been vulnerability, though it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Don't patronize me, Denzel. Don't stand there and tell me I'm wrong, like you've got it all figured out. You don't get to rewrite the narrative just because you don't like what I'm saying. I'm not rewriting anything, Denzel said, maintaining that slightly softer tone, even as his words remained firm. I'm trying to have a conversation with you. A real conversation. Not the performance you put on for everyone else, but an actual dialogue between two people who have dedicated their lives to the same thing. Jack turned away for a moment, running a hand through his hair. When he turned back, his eyes were harder again, the wall back up. You think this is a performance? You think I'm putting on a show right now? I think you've been performing for so long that you don't know how to stop, Denzel replied. I think you've built this persona, this image of the rebel who doesn't care what anyone thinks, and now you're trapped in it. You can't admit when you're wrong because that would crack the facade. This isn't a facade, Jack insisted, his voice rising with indignation. This is who I am. This is who I've always been. Unapologetic, unfiltered, real, Denzel challenged. Or just another role you've been playing for so long that you believe it yourself. Because the Jack Nicholson I'm talking to right now sounds defensive. Sounds like someone who's been backed into a corner and is lashing out because he doesn't know what else to do. Jack's hands clenched at his sides again. You don't know me, Denzel. You don't know what I think, or how I feel, or what drives me. We've crossed paths at parties and award shows. We've exchanged pleasantries. But you don't actually know me, so don't pretend that you do. You're right, Denzel conceded. I don't know you personally, but I know your work. I know your reputation. And I know that somewhere inside the man standing in front of me is someone who genuinely loves acting, who respects the craft enough to have given his entire life to it. That person wouldn't want to be remembered as the bitter old guard who couldn't accept change. Jack's face contorted with frustration. I'm not afraid of change. I've adapted my entire career. I've worked with new directors, new technologies, new approaches. What I won't do is pretend that everything new is automatically good just because it's new. That's not being resistant to change. That's having discernment. Discernment is one thing, Denzel said. Dismissal is another. When you make broad statements about an entire generation of actors, you're not being discerning. You're being dismissive. And that's what people hear. That's what gets repeated. That's what influences how others think. So I should censor myself, Jack asked, his tone mocking. I should carefully craft every statement to make sure no one's feelings get hurt. That's not who I am, Denzel. That's never been who I am. I'm not asking you to censor yourself, Denzel replied, his patience clearly wearing thin. I'm asking you to think about the impact of your words, to recognize that you have influence, and with that influence comes responsibility. You can be honest without being cruel. You can critique without condemning. Jack let out a harsh laugh. Responsibility? There's that word again. Everyone wants to hold me responsible for how other people feel about what I say. When did we all become so fragile? When did actors of all people start needing to be protected from criticism? It's not about protection, Denzel said, his voice taking on a sharper edge again. It's about respect. It's about recognizing that your experience doesn't give you the right to invalidate someone else's journey. These young actors are navigating a completely different industry than we did. Different pressures, different expectations, different challenges. You can't judge them by the standards of a world that doesn't exist anymore. The fundamentals don't change, Jack argued. Truth and performance, emotional honesty, commitment to the character. Those things are timeless. And if those fundamentals are being compromised in favor of marketability and mass appeal, then yes, I'm going to call it out. But who made you the judge? Denzel demanded. Who gave you the authority to decide what counts as legitimate acting and what doesn't? Your one voice, Jack. One perspective. And clinging to it so rigidly that you can't see any other viewpoint, that's not strength. That's stubbornness. Jack stepped forward again, closing the distance between them until they were nearly face to face. You keep talking about other viewpoints like they all have equal merit. They don't. Some people know what they're talking about, and some people don't. I've earned the right to trust my own judgment. I've earned the right to speak my mind without having to justify it to people who haven't walked the path I've walked. And I've walked a similar path, Denzel said, not backing away. So have countless other actors who disagree with you. Does our experience not count? Does our perspective not matter because it doesn't align with yours? Your perspective matters, Jack said, though his tone suggested otherwise. But your perspective doesn't make mine invalid. You can't come in here and tell me I'm wrong for having standards, for expecting excellence, for refusing to celebrate mediocrity just because it's popular. No one's celebrating mediocrity. But you're so focused on finding fault that you can't recognize excellence when it's happening right in front of you. You've decided that anything different from your approach is inferior, and that's just not true. Jack's jaw worked, his frustration mounting. Give me an example then. Give me one example of a young actor today who has the depth, the range, the raw talent that justifies all this defense you're mounting. I could give you 20 examples, Denzel said, but you wouldn't accept any of them because you've already made up your mind. You'd find something to criticize, some way to diminish their work, because admitting that they're talented would mean admitting that you might be wronged. Try me, Jack challenged. Name one. Denzel paused, studying Jack's face. This isn't about naming names. This isn't about proving anything to you. This is about you examining why you feel the need to be so critical in the first place. What are you really angry about, Jack? Because I don't think it's about acting at all. The question seemed to catch Jack off guard. His expression faltered, just for a second, before the defensive wall slammed back into place. I'm not angry. I'm disappointed. There's a difference. Disappointed in what? Denzel pressed. In them, or in something else. Jack's hands trembled slightly. In what we've allowed this business to become. In how we've prioritized profit over art. In how we've turned actors into brands instead of artists. In how we've lost something essential along the way. We haven't lost anything, Denzel said, his voice quieter now. It's still there. You just have to be willing to see it. But you can't see it if you're so busy mourning the past that you refuse to engage with the present. Jack's shoulders sagged slightly. Just a fraction, but enough to be noticeable. The past was better. The past is gone, Denzel replied, and holding onto it so tightly is only hurting you. The craft you love so much is still alive. It's still thriving. It just looks different than it did when you started. And that's okay. That's how it should be. Every generation adds something new, takes the art form in new directions. That's not a betrayal of what came before. It's a continuation of it. Jack looked at Denzel for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse. You really believe that? I do, Denzel said simply, and I think deep down, you do too. I think you're just scared to admit it, because it feels like letting go of something precious. The silence that followed was different from the charged tension that had dominated the conversation. This silence felt heavier, more profound. Jack looked away, his gaze drifting to somewhere beyond the cameras and lights. Maybe I am scared, Jack admitted quietly, the words barely audible. Maybe I'm scared that everything I built my life around doesn't matter the way it used to. That the things I valued, the standards I held myself to, are being dismissed as outdated. That I'm being dismissed as outdated. Denzel's expression softened completely. Your contributions matter, Jack. They always will. But mattering doesn't require tearing others down. You can honor what you've done and still make space for what others are doing. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. Jack met Denzel's eyes again, and for the first time since the conversation began, there was something approaching understanding between them. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to watch something change and not fight against it. Then maybe it's time to learn, Denzel said gently. Not for anyone else. For yourself. Because holding on to this anger, this frustration, it's not serving you. It's just making you miserable. Jack nodded slowly, seeming to process the words. The journalist, who had been watching this entire exchange in stunned silence, finally spoke. Should we continue with something else, or? Both Jack and Denzel turned to look at him as if they'd forgotten anyone else was in the room. Jack shook his head. No, I think we're done here. Denzel extended his hand. Jack looked at it for a moment, then reached out and shook it. The handshake was firm, meaningful. So there you have it. One of the most intense confrontations between two acting legends ever captured. What did you think?